I like to call it the lob question. The And I also need to just get over that right now my co-host looks like a news anchor. You look so professional today that I'm thrown, whereas I look like Cruella de Vil. So we're doing it. We're doing it today. Lanecia, welcome. And what is one of your favorite spaces and why?
Yo, thanks for having me. It's good to be with both of you. And yeah, I think anyone who knows me would say my favorite spaces are my studio, coffee shops, art museums, galleries, or any kind of public art. I love murals and cities. However, I will say at this particular time, um, in this season of life, my favorite space is the apartment that I'm in right now. Here in Richmond, we kind of made a move because my partner, my husband, got a job here in Richmond, Virginia. And I'm still based, my art practice is still based in Houston, but it was the first time in our partnership that we had a blank canvas for our home together. And so it's been so fun to create a space that we want to come home to, that is life-giving, that I cannot wait for COVID to be over for a number of reasons. But I have been missing hosting people. And so having a new
Same.
home space where we can host people that I love my studio, and sometimes I can stay there for hours, and my husband has to call Cleve. Let's name him Cleve. Cleve has to call me and be like, come home now. It's like 10 o'clock home. But I feel like here, this home, this space that we have created together, it's going to be so easy once I do make the transition to just like come home. It's just full of light, life, us, green things, all the green things,
Judging
and
by that corner, it is amazing.
I love my little corner. Yeah, it's good. It's home, and it feels really good. And so grateful that we have this space together, and that and it feels, honestly, Sarah and Josie, right? Yeah, it
Yes.
feels like a little bit of a coffee shop, like our favorite things about the coffee shop experience. We met in a coffee shop. We have a coffee shop romance, and then
Stop it.
museum. Yes. We even got married in a coffee shop. Like that's how much. So when I say people would say those are my favorite space, like coffee shops are my favorite spaces, it's so true. And I have been missing that space during the pandemic. But yeah, so we have a little bit of our favorite things about that. And then the art that we are slowly but surely moving into our home. We have been giving a lot of attention to how we place it, the breathing room we allow around it, what art we are bringing in. And so, yeah, it's a little bit of all of our favorite things in one. So this is my place. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I love the idea even of being able to have a studio so that your space becomes like it's like making an area. I think during the pandemic people have had a tough time like when does work stop? Um I actually had a meeting with my therapist yesterday and I just started with a new therapist, which by the way, guys, is like a really awkward speed dating experience, if I'm honest. She's
Mhm.
great and I'm excited to work with her, but it just was like very, and she said, look, I need you to know that when you're doing therapy in your home, maybe you should light a candle, change where you're sitting, not be at work because you're going to want to be performative if you think you're working. So I think our boundaries between work and life and self care and all that, because it's all happening in one space. I love the idea of creating a separation between this is when I'm doing art, this is when I'm engaged in the work of the art, and this is when I'm home and I'm enjoying my spouse or my partner. I'm enjoying our life together, and we're curating it together, which is so fun because I'm betting that he doesn't get a lot of say in what happens in the studio.
No, he doesn't. Though he tries, he'll come in and be like, he's very orderly. So order, cleanliness, and all that things, all of that matters to him. But my art, right? It's like layered. I take dirt from outside. I mean, I will have until I host a workshop. It's it's my creative brain out on my art table and in the space. And so he likes to stay away from that. But yeah, every now and then he'll come in and paint with me. So that's a lot of fun too. Yeah.
Josie,
That's
does Ryan
cute.
wish you had a studio?
Yes, I actually recently changed up. So I make leather jewelry.
As well as Prince art. I mean, she just does it all. Uh-huh.
I do it
Well, that's
all.
funny. I checked out your Instagram. I've seen your work. Yeah, it's really,
Thanks.
I like it. I like it.
It's super fun.
Thank you. Yeah, so I make leather jewelry, which is my current obsession in the sense that I spend hours doing the thing, you know. It's fun. But I would do it on the kitchen table, which drove him crazy cuz he grew up very Mormon, and Mormons are very like family oriented,
Very
very
Mormon
like very
versus
Mormon.
a touch
And
of
so
Mormon.
yeah, he's like, I really like the idea of us sitting at the kitchen table and eating, which is not Mormon, right? But it's just like, you know, what his context is. And I was like, I just want to watch TV on the couch and eat on the couch because I was never allowed to do that growing up, eating outside of the kitchen. So I took over the kitchen table and he made a space on a really long desk. We have a computer desk. So he like moved everything around. So I have a little space on this desk for me to make leather jewelry, which is a lot less space than I'm used to. But he's like, no, look, now we can have dinner together. And I was like, fine, I guess.
Making
It's just
space for each
beautiful.
other.
Yeah. And this is the first time in our marriage we've had a kitchen table, like a dining table where we can eat at together. And like that has been such a gift to like move away from the TV and sit. And I love plating. I just like hosting, you know, and
Same.
so the candles, the plating, the cooking, and all of that stuff has been yeah, so much happens at the kitchen table. So it's been great to have one.
I don't have technically a kitchen table, so you're currently in my living room slash dining room, because I turned my dining room space into my office and podcast studio. But I live in California, so normally you can just eat outside. And so I have a patio set that is a dining room table that folds out and is big. And the best part about it is the way that my apartment slash condo is, you come up the stairs and the first thing you see is my ginormous patio. And so it's fun because hosting people has been such a big part of who I am as well. And so to be able to like host people, even like during the pandemic, because they can be really far apart from each other. Um, I act like really far apart in California terms, which is like not actually that far apart, but 6 feet. And so I think it's interesting the idea of having an actual dining room table, because I've started to do the thing without even realize I was doing it, where I'm taking my food, my meal when I'm alone and eating out on the patio, because I was eating in front of my computer constantly, which is just not good for our headspace, right? Like if everything happens in this tiny, less than couple of feet space, it becomes where you're never giving your brain a break. And I think sometimes we have to make space in our own brains for creativity to happen. Lanecia, I would love for you to share, if you're cool with it. How did you enter into art? Because when I met you, you were doing ministry. You want to give just a little bit of like you don't have to give it in a resume form, but how did you move from being someone who talked about the divine to someone who sort of brings out, like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so yeah, we met in div school. I was in ministry for 15 years, just about. And my last position, I managed an art project with men and women who were living on the streets in downtown Houston. And art had always, like, music was a love. Like, I played the guitar, but a lot of it was done like in the quietness of my home. Some of the music I did out loud, but it was always things I was exploring, parts of myself, but I almost suppressed them a bit because that wasn't my job, that wasn't my vocation, that wasn't my thing. But I had always hungered and longed to do that as the thing, right? But fearful, all the things, reasons why I didn't. But when I went to manage this art project, I literally told Rudy and Juanita, I was like, I'm not an artist. Why do you want me to manage a project? And then we're like, that's not why we need you. You know, we need you
Oh,
to do something
Rudy.
else. I love him so much. He was like, we'll figure out the rest. And maybe they were able to see something that I couldn't see at the time. And so I went, and as I was directing this project, every now and then in the shelter, I'd be sitting there and in the studio with them, and they would be teaching me things, or I'd be tapping in and doing workshops with the artists in the program. And eventually, the desire to do it just got so great. And I knew that it was the language that I wanted to speak. It was the way I wanted to offer myself to the world. And in 2013, I had a traumatic loss of a child. And when we realized I was pregnant, I began to do some real work to become the mother that I wanted to be for her. So motherhood really changed me. When she died and we lost her, the aloneness of my grief really just opened up the space for me to do some real healing and courage building and naming and visioning of what life needed to be like for me to live with the pain and the absence of her. And her name is AJ. And so I just started dreaming out loud and naming the Cleve. You know, I want to get a studio downtown. I want to make art. Ministry has been draining me for years. I'm constantly being depressed and having to pull away and then dive, and then I jump right back in. Um, I want to make art. I want to be this artist that I have always longed to be. And so within a 9 months period, it was not intentionally 9 months, but it just so happened, I got the studio. I started making the art. I started showing the work. I started selling the work. And then I wanted to be at the studio more than I wanted to be at my office at the church. And that's when I knew in September 2014 that I needed to resign and go ahead and just full on leap into a life as a full-time artist. So
I just love that. I love this. We joke around it. So Rudy Rasmus is a pastor in Houston. Him and his wife are phenomenal. Rudy, I don't even know how we became friends, but we always just encouraging me, always. And I'm almost afraid because he almost has this sort of a like prophetic ability to be like, you need to be doing the thing. So you're like, don't that? I don't know. He's going to be on the podcast. We're excited. I mean, I even think about all that he's done during the pandemic to like feed people, to like have Beyonce help sponsor things. He's like, this is how we're just going to do it. And if we're going to be a little bit superficial, him and his wife are the coolest looking people on the face of, I mean, just from his goatee to like, I want to be half as cool. Half
they
as
are
cool.
beautiful human beings, right? Like all around and just cool. Like Rudy and Juanita.
Juanita,
Cool.
yeah, her book's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's
I'm not
nice.
surprised that they saw something in you that I think sometimes we forget that we have this beautiful power to see things in people that they don't see and name it and like ask them to risk trying something. And that may not be the thing. I think the thing that we're learning as Josie and I talk to tons of space makers, whether they're designers or, you know, people who, you know, create ministry for folks, they oftentimes it's been someone else that's pointed out something in them and then they try it. And that may not be the thing they end up in, but being willing to like say the next yes has brought them to something more. And you know, there are some people who like do it on their own, and I think that's amazing. But how often our community are the one who see this gifting in us that we don't even see, and we're not even ready to step into. So I think last week our bishop spoke to our denomination about this idea of like, if you see something in someone else, name it, name like we just assume they know. And I just love that idea. Like you got to name the thing.
Name the thing. And that is a gifting that they have. And something I got to carry with me too, just the importance of seeing well and naming and then just letting it go, right? And not trying to control the narrative of other people, but just
Oof.
allowing people to go on their own. And they they along with other people in my community have been such supporters and encouragers in this new thing that I'm living. Yeah. So
Well, it's incredible. So when you do
I
a
yeah.
workshop with people, how are you helping them sort of tap into something? Is it people who have had the experience of doing art before as a way of processing through things, or are you usually working with like newbies?
Yeah, everybody, honestly. I, you mentioned, so Tina Knowles, I heard her one time, she spoke at something related to St. John's, and she talked about making space for art to happen. And I've just carried that with me in my work, and the importance of making space for people to tap into their creativity, providing the techniques, I mean, teaching, sharing my techniques, providing the tools, but then getting out of the way and allowing their own individual creativity to take shape and form. And so when I do that, then it makes room for people from all like skill levels and places of curiosity and on their journeys to create, right? And so I see that as my job with workshopping, is to set the table, to provide the tools, and just make space for art to happen. Yeah.
I love the idea of the table setting. I know 2020 and the beginning of 2021 has been filled with trauma. And you shared a bit that your story comes out of trauma, right? So you experienced a great loss, and then your response was I would say, an opening, like a something in you opened up that was painful and raw. And I think many people can relate to that. How have you seen sort of the position of art during this time? What have you noticed in your community of artists, or even both losses and gains during this time, if you don't mind kind of?
Yeah. Wow. It's been a spectrum, right? Like I've had some artist friends, colleagues who have really struggled to create during this time, had to pause for a while and um, do some other work in order to get back to the making. For me, it's been really good to be planted. I shared that I love cities and I really love to travel. And part of my studio practice has been a lot of workshopping and leading things that in other cities that require me to jump on a plane and then come home. But with the pandemic, like all of that froze and stopped, right?
Oh, I
And
know.
yeah, and all the coffee shop meetings, right? Like where I love them, but like they add up in time, and then Houston is a driving city and all that jazz. And so it was such, gosh, I've just lived in the tension of the great loss and the pain of last year, and the way that it provided some opening and possibilities as well. I think for us all, and creatively for me, it's been really good to be planted and allow ideas to really develop and to play. Like there's space. Like I'm not, when I'm in the studio, it's not like, okay, I need to do this work because I'm about to travel again and I have a deadline. But there's been room for me to like really play and do things that I don't necessarily have to share with the world, but I can follow my curiosity and learn through the process. And so it's been a fertile time, I think, for me creatively. And it's been a good space to just be honest about what I'm feeling. And I'm seeing that with a number of my colleagues as well, that art at this time with the pace that we're in has been the space of like, they've been able to see well what's going on, like paying attention to what's happening in the world around us, what's happening in themselves personally, and then having the gift of their practice to wrestle with those questions and the things that they see and create. And I think it's been a gift for us all, like during the pandemic, the Alvin Ailey Dance Company, oh my gosh, I'm so glad they're doing these, like dance has been such a gift for me. I mean, and I named them, but there's also this little kid, and I can't think of his name. My sister sends his Instagram all the time, but he loves to dance, and his mom and dad like film these things to share with us. And just even that, seeing the ways in which we have been creative about making space for each other, about sharing our lives together in ways that kind of give some joy and delight and hope and um, even belonging in the midst of this isolation. that creativity has been really beautiful, I think, to see. I know for me it has. So yeah,
It's
art's been
interesting
that.
even that you mentioned Alvin Ali because that is a it is an all black dance troupe. And when I was in grad school with Lanecia, I danced on an all black dance troupe because our friend Halima forgot to tell me that it was an all black dance troupe when I auditioned. But she danced with them when they came to town. They would. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, she
Uh,
they held open auditions for locals to participate in one of their touring shows that they did. So like weeks and months before they would come and do a show, they would have local dancers audition, right? And so that was my first exposure to the company. And they come out of a painful, like use your body to express the pain, almost like work it out. They're like, I think about, so I danced with Halima for so long and some of the stuff we did was difficult, but she's just a strong dancer. But she would come with these blisters and like her body would hurt so bad because what they do is some of the most beautiful, but oh, the strength it takes. And it kind of, it really, that art and what's happening in the world and what they've experienced and like this, it's just so, it's like a embodiment of something so deep and beautiful. I can watch them, but then I watch them and I just go, I'm so out of shape. They're incredible and strong. And I'm like, I would fall. I can barely hold a downward dog at this point. Like, what are you people doing with your lives? What am I not doing with my life? I tried to convince Josie to do yoga yesterday, but she's got a nerve issue that means that she can't do a lot of this stuff. So I find this expression, this use of body to be so inspiring.
oh my
Art.
gosh. I mean, and poetry too is something that's very much a part of my practice, my own centering practice and the work that I do. And last year, I sat with Alice Walker's poetry collection, Hard Times Requires Furious Dancing. And she touches on that a lot about the embodiment and what we are carrying and how we work that out through our bodies. And I definitely see that in the work of Alvin Ailey, but company. But I think too, like you said, like with my own trauma and just what people, how art can provide this space for us to release, you know, and not hold it and to let out some of the things that we can, if we're not careful, like store up and they can fester and eat at us, right? That it's this space of just a space of release. And so it's definitely been that for me. And I have appreciated the opportunity to engage other art forms during this time. The virtual world has provided that kind of space for us, and it's not the way I think any of us really would want to engage the arts. You know, I cannot wait to go back to a live concert and theater and all those things. But it's been a gift, I think, to be able to still engage the arts in that way. So,
Yeah, seeing you in a
Yeah, I love
gallery
this
has made me
idea
jealous.
of
Go, sorry, Jess.
yeah. I love this idea of taking the pandemic as a blessing as an artist, and kind of not pressuring yourself into doing something when it's not like the natural thing to do. Because I poetry is also part of my artistic practice, but I have not written very much poetry at all. Usually, I have these like this collection of full journals in my living room, and I can usually fill up a journal in a month or two, 3 months if it's a slow period of time. But I haven't filled up a single one all the way through. And I've kind of allowed myself that space, especially as somebody who went to art school. Um, Giving into like the kitsch Etsy world is so taboo when you go to art school. It's like, wow, you're such a sellout selling jewelry or whatever. But I've kind of given that, I've shoved that all out of my brain during the pandemic because it's like, this is what feels good to me right now, to be creative in a way that's not so emotional, because art can be very emotional, at least for me. And yeah, making leather jewelry has been a huge blessing because it keeps me going. It keeps up the creative brain, it keeps like the muscle working, but it's not fatiguing me. It's not making me feel like I'm producing for the sake of producing. It's just, this is the fun thing to do right now, and it's creative. And if I'm a sellout, well then fuck it.
I mean, I
Literally.
think that, gosh, who's that psychologist? I can't think of the name, but that talks about creative flow, right? And just the gifts, like we can get into these zones that sometimes the needle point making, where we're following a pattern and not having, like you're saying, like the emotional, like having to wrestle and deal with all these things, but just following a pattern or playing with color. When we initially lost AJ, I could not sleep at night, but I would get watercolor paints and just, there's something about playing with the color and water. And I wasn't making anything that we even hang on our walls now. They're in a box, but it was something about just tapping into that part of ourselves, that creative part of ourselves, and that the repetitive motion and just the play and all of that. That was deeply cathartic for me and like healing, and didn't require, yeah, that's and it's good. I think it's good. It's all good. That's how I
I,
feel.
I have goosebumps
I feel
hearing
like
you talk about
whenever we,
that. Yeah, because so often
yeah,
we treat it like a discipline. Um, that's something like you have to the struggle of art, the war of art, which is great. It's a great book, but the struggle of art, the war, like you have to be. Josie, I didn't make the connection that you were doing less emotional art until now, but it's an emotional time. So to add to that doesn't allow for you to be where you are in it. And I just think that it's a wonderful thing to say to people like, hey, right now you don't have to be making your, big statement piece. What if right now it is just, hey, I want to keep flexing these muscles of creativity. What really excites me, and I don't, maybe not even what really excites me, but what really gives me a sense of calm or peace is to do something, like you said, follow a pattern, get something done. I think that the like in this time there, I don't know, I'll do something and I'll go, I just did the laundry. Like, and I live alone, so there's no one to celebrate it with me. But I'm like, look at me doing laundry. Like, you just have to almost see different things as like a resistance to this. I think you named it earlier, that depression you feel when you're in a place that you're not meant to be. And I don't want to glaze over even what you said earlier, where you recognize that like I'm doing really good work and it's not the work I'm supposed to be doing. And I think there comes a rub there where some people then just keep pressing into it harder because we were taught discipline, just keep, okay, everything, not every job, every job has things you don't like. Well, if you keep hitting this wall where there's depression and you're almost outside of yourself and you're doing good work, how did you give yourself permission to move from that space? I mean, I feel like it's such a incredible thing to go, yeah, this isn't the thing. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, from the outside, so many people must have been saying, like, you're doing art with those who are experiencing homelessness. Like, how much more beautiful work can you do? And it feels hard, especially stepping out of ministry, to feel that sense of, no, this is my, how did you do that? Can you share that a little bit?
yeah. I think for so long, Sarah, I cared a lot about what other people, more than, I shouldn't say I cared a lot, but I think I gave too much weight to what other people
Mm,
thought I should be doing. The
mm,
shoulds, like the shoulds. And I don't use should in my vocabulary anymore. And when we lost AJ, and through my with my therapist and just that healing process, a big part was letting go of the shoulds and allowing myself to be, like
mm,
just to be. And so I stepped into it knowing that other people around me who are not intimately involved in my journey would fully understand, and not really even caring. It was like, yeah, this is good. And it's draining me. And I'm going to choose life. Like, I've got to choose life. And there's somebody else out there who this work will give them life. And they're probably being drained in something else right now. And I'm going to open up a space for them to experience life or not. It may not, nobody may feel it, but I can't be concerned with that. I know, like, I just knew I needed to step. And so I did. And it's been good. And I wake up every morning. It's hard. It's a magnificent struggle. But when I wake up in the morning, I want to get back to it, you know? And yeah, and all of the work that I've done in the past has helped to make the person that I am today. And I carry everything with me. So even the workshop part of my practice is because the work that I did at the art project. And I saw how bringing people to an art table could make space for healing, for discovery, for curiosity fostering, for beauty, right? How it can make space for connection and community. And I knew that that's how I began to reclaim my artist identity and get the courage to do what I needed to do. And so I knew in my practice, like I workshop making, hosting this table is an important part of carrying what I gained there into the work that I do. And so, yeah, I stepped into what I felt that was true for me, right? And couldn't really be concerned with how wacky, even to my parents, it sounded. Because they were like, "What?" If I told them I was going to move to Nashville and start writing songs and playing the guitar again and try to start, they would be like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." But painting, and my dad came to my studio for the first time last year, and when he walked in, his eyes got so big, and he said, "Your grandfather, who was a pastor, he was like, he would have loved this. He would have loved to have seen you in this space and see what flowed out of you." And that was like, yeah, and
It's
so
like you can't be working for that. You can't be working for the approval of your
nope,
ancestors, but in some way, then to know once you've stepped in that your ancestors are going, yep.
yep, right, right. Yeah, but at least I couldn't. That was it. That cannot be a part, because I would have just, yeah, continued in a cycle of not truly listening to my inner voice that was saying, like, say yes, don't fear, like move, and like,
Mm.
and so, yeah, it's been good.
I think I had a therapist one time say, you sit on a pile of shoulds. Because I would like say, here's what my heart loves, da, 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 but I should. And he just was like, you are just shoulding all over yourself, kid. He's like, you are sitting on a pile of should. And I was just like, you're not wrong. And one of the expressions, it's interesting, and I've loved following you for years, but I intuitively, for whatever reason, I couldn't think of something to do for Lent a couple of years in my last position I was doing. And I've always done visual art. That was a big part of my high school experience. And I love also doing, and so I led a class in praying through the arts. And so I had every week I would just create space in the sanctuary that I had. And I just put out tables and we would read scripture. We'd do like Lectio Divina, but in a way that like allowed people to react artistically. And we would start with people would still at first like engineers show up because like their wives were like, hey, we're going to do this, and they would come, or like people that just they would all the time say, well, I'm not an artist, but I'm just going to be here, like no one gets to look at this, right? Yeah, no, we're not putting these on the wall. It's not like your pastor doing the bait and switch where we're like, we're going to do something, and then you put it up and make a big point about it. It was like, no, 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 this is for you, this is what we're going to do. And every time someone would say, am I doing it right? So the first week you'd just say like, no, no, just because you're doing it right. And it was so life-giving for me to watch people understand that there is no, it's saying yes, right? It's saying yes. And I recently was dropping something off at someone's home, and I went into the bathroom, and this person claims to not be creative, but they really, really are. And there was this art piece they made 7 years ago, maybe, in a art class, and it just had this word on it, and this was something that when they originally were making it, they said this isn't very good. And they have it up in they've moved. This is their brand new home. There's something about that piece that was made out of Lent, out of a conversation about grief, that they love so much. They have it in their primary bathroom and we all put nice things in our bathroom, primary bathroom in their home. And I think, wow, there is something that we don't even know when we say yes, what we're saying yes to, and how it's allowing other people to find their yeses. So I love that you let go of your shoulds, because we are so as women of faith, or if you grew up in the faith tradition, like it's so easy to fall back into just what do other people need me to be about.
What should I do? I mean, my therapist told me my first year of my small business to say no more than I said yes. And I was like, what? And like would hold me accountable, but helping me. And she's like, really say no to the things that you even probably could say yes to practice being able to say no and really truly discerning what you want to say yes to, and not doing it out of obligations or the shoulds, and that was so liberating for me, to be able to do that. And as you were talking to, I was just thinking about how art, and when we allow space for that, yes, right, for people to say that and to really confront the things that I think hinders us from fully living into our identity, and embracing our creative selves. Like I truly believe all of us are creative. How we use that creativity, either for good things or destruction, that's can be talked about. But we all are creative, and that there's transformative power when we can tap into that and in the things that we make, and when we engage what other humans or what we even create, there can be so much power in that. And so that I love hearing that their artwork is on their bathroom wall. That's great.
I think
That's
that's like the great fallacy of the American public school system is teaching kids that they have to choose a lane, and that, you know, accepting STEM versus STEAM and the arts aren't as important. They're the first thing that are cut. As somebody who did a lot of the arts in high school, I did marching band and choir that I got kicked out of. And
Why is
not
that not a
knowing,
surprise?
I know, and I know it's a story, and I want to know it, but we won't
Yeah, keep
digress right
going.
now.
the basic gist of the story is that I was in marching band and I knew how to read music, and none of the choir kids did, and everybody was jealous and whatever. Anyways, um, but I never knew that I was a visual artist until college. I went to college as a business major, and I picked up a camera.
Whoa, stop. Wait, what? How long have I known you? You were a business major?
Yeah, I went all the way through accounting, and then I was like, I don't like accounting. And not to say accounting was pretty easy, like the first level of class that I took, but I was like, this is so boring. I do not appreciate this. So in college, I ended up double majoring in journalism and art. But it was in journalism that I discovered that I loved photography, which I should have known. I've taken pictures. If you look through all the Facebook albums that are locked on my Facebook for only me to see, they're all like these really obscure images from like all these little trips that I would take with my family. And I was always capturing moments and feelings, and I should have known since the start that, I was an artist. So, I feel like we just need to teach people, continue the kindergarten education and teach people that you're creative, you can do this. Even if you're not the next Picasso, you can still express yourself creatively for the sake of expressing yourself creatively and helping, yourself process and emote in healthy ways. Because a lot of times you see these people who don't know how to process their feelings, and maybe they would be able to do so if they just drew a little picture.
Word.
That's so good. Maybe if you just, we should have said that to the rioters yesterday. You should just draw a little picture and you'll
Draw a
feel
little
much better.
pic.
I think though there is something to be said about we're tapping into something that I think is true, that we have made a hierarchy where some forms of schooling is more important and some is less important, and some is more valuable in society and some is more devalued. And when we do that, then people don't feel like they can live out of their, even if they're like naturally talented, they feel like they can't live out of it. And to celebrate kind of all of it and see all of it as a genius, a form of genius, is, we're really missing out. And I that's why I love the idea of workshopping, because people discover things about themselves. So I am so grateful that you are doing this work, Lanecia.
Oh, Thanks. Yeah. And, and during the pandemic, have y'all noticed how people have been like leaning into like new crafts or new loves and explore? Yeah, like plants, even like learning and caring for plants, or yeah, yeah,
My little planties.
or taking these online classes that probably if they hadn't had a pause, right, they may never have um, mustered up the courage or just had the space even to say, yeah, I'm going to try this and just see. So it's been cool to yeah.
I'm going to try this and just see. That is an incredible way to look at it. Instead of, I'm going to perfect this, I'm going to get great at this. American culture has taught us, I'm going to get really good at this. I joked earlier about yoga. I actually been doing yoga for so long and I love it, but I do online yoga with this teacher, Adrienne. Yoga with Adrienne. Everyone and their mom has tried it at least once. And I love her because she has the whole mentality of, yeah, if you can't do this, that's fine. Like, just sort of like, that doesn't, and she will constantly say, you showed up today. Even if you just showed up and you were in the child's pose the whole time, you were here to be. We spend so many days not being here. And like, I love that idea of like, okay, I'm just going to try. I'm going to show up and whatever will be, will be. And it's the thing that was meant to be. And this is what it is today. I love. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, Lanecia. Where can folks find you?
Sure. So on all the social media platforms, I'm LAR, LAR Art Studio. And then my website is larartphotography.com.
Yeah. Photography. Okay. And then the last question we have for you, if you're ready, is, and it's not that difficult of a question, but some tangible thing that someone do today to make them like space for themselves or others, and you can take it in whatever way you want to take making space. What's one thing someone could do today to make space for themselves or others?
Okay, so I think I will offer a practice. It's called like the prayer of examine, where at the end of the day you take time to really reflect on your day and just ask. I always invite people to ask 2 questions. What drained me today? Just name that, be honest with yourself. And then ask yourself, what gave me life? And that question too, most people are like, what do you mean it gave me life? Well, I mean, like, what made you feel alive today? What gave you delight and joy today? What fostered growth for you today? Name those things, and then do some work and planning of making space for more of the things that give you life, and then less of the things that drain you, and we have some control sometimes in those things, or maybe just listen to that, because that may be some signals that you may need to say yes to something else and let go of some things. But I think that's what I would encourage people to do. And we can think about that in relations to like the things we do or how we are in the world and our relationships even, those 2 examine questions can help us be better siblings and neighbors and friends and lovers and all of those things, just to ask those 2 simple questions. So that's what I would suggest.
That's amazing suggestion. Well, you can find us online at anything really on any social media of Making Spaces podcast, Making Spaces podcast on Instagram. You can find Josie at Josie Takes the World. You can find me at Rev Sarah Heath on most things. You can find us at our website, which is makingspacespodcast.com. Josie.
Josie.
Do you have anything you want to add? Did I forget anything?
Just head to our patreon.com/makingspacespodcast and give us some money. We'll give you some cool stuff in return. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we will see you next week where we will be
saving a space for you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for having us.